Hey guys, welcome to The Strong Young Man. 30 is not the new 20. This is one of the most damaging statements that people tell the younger generation. This belief implies that your 20s are meaningless for partying and for living your best life. Understand that most of the important life events and growth happen in your 20s. Your 20s may not feel that consequential because the significance of the decisions made in this decade are not apparent immediately. Just understand that over time, a small deviation from your intended path in the beginning will result in a wider deviation as the years go on. How you spend your 20s will determine how you spend the rest of your life. Good habits, your attitude, and your work ethic do not offer a linear return on investment. Any behaviour, good or bad, often seems to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold. In the beginning, the return is minimal, which may make us believe that the good behaviours we are doing aren't paying off and bad behaviours don't negatively affect us so much. These delayed outcomes make it seem as though the investment into things that benefit us are not worth the effort. The lack of visibility of the immediate return tends to result in us losing motivation to continue. You must get past this tendency. The return on investment is small in the beginning, but just like compound interest, eventually exponential growth will take place, seemingly out of nowhere. Most of what happens to you throughout your entire life, good or bad, is a result of the decisions you've made in your 20s. It may not be obvious what has caused your success or your suffering later in life because you may have stored the potential of the good and bad habits over a number of years, often out of sight. This positivity or negativity could all unleash in one instant. Breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions which have built up the potential required to unleash change. The Chinese bamboo tree doesn't grow at all in the first 5 years of its life. With sufficient water and fertile ground, it spends the first 5 years building an extensive root system. In a breakthrough moment, the bamboo tree springs 25 metres in the air within 6 weeks. The taller it grows, the faster its growth rate. In a similar way, genuine success is more organic, but it will take years to build up. You may have to go 5 years building your own extensive root system before you have anything to show for it. It's so difficult to keep going when you can't see the progress, but like the bamboo tree, you must keep going if you want to reach your breakthrough moment. Take a look at what happens when you compare good behaviour and bad behaviour over the short and long term. Putting in hard work doesn't provide much benefit in the short to medium term, nor do the consequences of not doing hard work. Early on, the difference appears insignificant. This is why it can be disheartening in the short term, because for all the hard work you put in, you yield only a small return on investment. Considering the long-term aspect, I'm talking years-long time, decades of performing good behaviours, the gap becomes wider and wider. In fact, the longer you do a particular habit, the less effort you'll have to put in to yield a larger return over the same time frame. This is the best part about good habits. They result in exponential growth and require less and less maintenance over time. The opposite of this is true for bad habits. Bad habits are easy in the beginning and much easier to perform the more they are built into your character. After years of performing bad habits, a small setback can cause massive destruction as the bad habits compound over time. It can also take an exponential amount of effort just to get you back on track. A plane travelling from London to Miami that departed 7 degrees north would cause it to end up in New York. The longer the plane is angled in the wrong direction and the further it travels, the greater the effort required to circle back to its original destination. By the time we reach 30, we will have invested in our future or chosen not to. By 30, it takes a lot more effort to change your path to the path of success if you've lived a life of failure. Our life habits and attitudes become more set, and we become limited by the decisions we made in our 20s. We will have more responsibilities, such as owning a house or having children, which make it difficult to change directions. As we get older, taking risks becomes more riskier because we risk things not just for ourselves, but for our own family. Most of the results from your life, including your financial successes, your personal successes, and your happiness, or the lack of all of these, develop from the decisions we made in our 20s. The importance of your 20s doesn't appear to be significant at the time, but in retrospect, people come to realise that these events played a massive role in their future. Think of your potential for success like shooting an arrow from a bow. The arrow cannot be thrusted through the air at speed without first being pulled back to store its potential. As a man, your 20s is your most defining decade, and you should spend it setting yourself up for the rest of your life. The primary reason not to waste your 20s, especially your early 20s, is for biological reasons. At certain stages of your life, there are critical periods where the brain is primed for growth and development. The brain goes through what's known as its first rapid maturation phase in the months before and after birth. This is known as myelinogenesis, where the myelin sheath is forming. This rapid maturation phase enables children to develop their hearing, binocular vision, and learn language. In the early phases of life, the brain produces far more neurons than it can use, which results in inefficient brain function and clumsiness. The brain prunes the synapses that allow these neurons to transmit messages. This pruning of unused circuits serves to increase brain efficiency. After this pruning, we strengthen the existing brain circuits, but learning new skills, including learning a new language, becomes significantly harder. A second maturation phase occurs throughout later childhood and early adolescence. During this second phase of increased brain growth, the prefrontal cortex is the site of the brain's most active reorganisation. The prefrontal cortex is where the highest cognitive and emotional control networks are constructed. These networks direct the complex mental processes that allow us to plan, organise, prioritise, communicate, solve problems, manage emotions, and learn from mistakes. This second maturation phase does not end until around 25, after which more development becomes so much harder. Again, the brain prunes the synapses of unused neurons to maintain efficient function. Essentially, the more you use your brain in your early 20s, the more brain you can use for the rest of your life. This is why it is so important not to waste your 20s. Spend time developing your intellectual intelligence, your social intelligence, and your emotional intelligence, rather than sustaining brain damage from watching fucking TikToks. This will ensure your neurons are developed to their full potential, which will serve you for the rest of your life. Because the final rapid maturation phase doesn't complete until around 25, and the male brain hasn't finished its development until about 30, men shouldn't be making big life decisions in their early 20s. You may experience consequences for the rest of your life because of bad decisions you made when your brain wasn't fully developed. Think of the time up until you're about 26 as an extended period of schooling. Every book you read before 26 will have a much higher rate of retention than something you read when you're older. This is why I say don't get into long-term relationships in your 20s. You are taking away the opportunity to learn and build your wealth of knowledge. At the worst, you may suffer long-term consequences for decisions made during this time. Keep your options open during this learning phase of your life to ensure that you have access to a smorgasbord of opportunities in your 30s. For the most responsible way to keep your options open, check out episode 80. When you become successful, the outside world will always see it as an overnight success. Everyone will see the immediate result without the extensive root system that has been developing beneath the surface for years, perhaps for decades. Just like the bow and arrow, the further it's pulled back, the more potential is stored, and the further and faster the arrow is thrusted forwards. The work you are doing today, laying the foundations, is what makes the success possible. You will never regret improving your situation. The effort will always be worth it. This success may take more than a few years to cultivate, but if you live for today, tomorrow becomes your worst nightmare. Just because you don't see the result doesn't mean it's time to give up. Tectonic plates spend millions of years building pressure, pushing against each other, but in one instant, a massive movement occurs and the world is shaken up by it. The years of building pressure, pushing together in the same way they always have, has finally made an impact. This will be you if you are patient and you stay the course. You are just storing potential for when this breakthrough happens. Don't quit before this moment. I'm rooting for you. Thanks for watching today's episode. The topic of episode 122 is divide and conquer. Subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when it drops. Catch you then.